final quarter begins right now.
And just like that, the San Diego Padres season has come to an end. Thanks for joining us on the final quarter on CBS 8+. I'm Karthik Venkatraman. We'll hear from Jake Garriani here shortly as he's down at Wrigley Field after the Padres season once again comes to an end to the Chicago Cubs with a 3-1 loss in Game 3. What a season it was for this team. There's a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries that they had to overcome in the thick of a division race, but the time the season's over, 165 games is what they'd play, 162 in the regular season, 3 in the postseason. Looking to try and take it from the Cubs, just not able to. Jake Garriani down at Wrigley Field, who gives us the team's reaction after the season's over.
You know, there was a moment in this final wild card game between the Cubs and Padres where Chicago got the bases loaded in the bottom of the second with nobody out, and it felt like the season was on life support. But then San Diego got out of the jam, giving up just 2 runs, and you felt like there was a pulse. But at the end of the day, none of that mattered because the Padres offense just did not show up here in Chicago. They left 19 runners on base. They were 3 of 26 with runners in scoring position, and the top 3 batters in the order between Fernando Tatis Jr., Luis Arraez, and Manny Machado were 4 of 33. That is a 121 average. And now, over their past 5 postseason games dating back to last year, the Padres have scored a grand total of 5 runs. After the loss, we were in the clubhouse. This is what the team had to say.
It's not fun, you know. That's the only bad thing about sports. You know, one got to win and one got to lose. You know, so it sucks that we're on the losing side.
I mean, it was a good series, hard fought, tight. You know, a lot of big moments. You know, basically didn't get it done. You know, as a wrap-up point.
I mean, the team is ready. This team is ready. We fell short this year, but I mean, we're confident in the group that we have that we can go out there and repeat it every single year. So, you know, I hope they continue to do that and listen to us and ultimately listen to the fans that want to bring a championship to the city of San Diego.
And as far as the Padres and their captain, Manny Machado, reflect on this season as a whole, well, I asked him that direct question, and here is our interaction.
I know it just ended, but how do you assess a season like this?
I mean, what type of question is that, dude? My guy. How do I assess the season? We just lost. How do you think I assess the season? How do you think I assess it?
I don't know. That's what I was asking.
You tell me. What's a loss? We lost. How do you assess it? It's a loss. You lost.
Fair enough.
Come on, dude. I mean, you could ask better questions than that. Let's go. Come on.
Ultimately, the Padres offense cannot get the job done here in Chicago, and 41 years later, the Cubs get their revenge against the Padres in the postseason. I'll leave Wrigley Field with the Terry Francona quote. He says, "The season doesn't just wind down, it comes to a crashing halt." For one last time in Chicago, I'm Jake Garriani. Let's go ahead and send it back to you.
You can hear the sadness and frustration from the players, manager Mike Schultz, and specifically Manny Machado when he was asked by our Jake Garriani how he assesses the season. Obviously, a lot of tensions, and this team felt like they could have achieved more. There were things in this game, in this series, though, that just had to have Padres fans boiling at some of the stuff. We talk about the controversial 9th inning. We'll start there. Xander Bogaerts was up to bat. It was a full count, and the ball was definitely low. And the home plate umpire called a strike. That ended up being the first out of the 9th inning for the San Diego Padres, in which they would have had a runner on first and second. And then they could have gotten a runner on first with Xander Bogaerts. Then they could have moved a runner to first and second if everything had played the way that we thought it was going to play. So Xander Bogaerts gets walked. Then you would have 2 hit by pitches. I get the bases loaded with no outs. Let's continue to say everything plays the same. Jake Cronenworth able to dribble one in the infield. That would have scored a run after Jackson Merrill started off the 9th hitting a solo home run, would have made it 3-2. Freddie Fermin then hits that ball out to deep at the warning track, and instead of the final out of the game, it would have been a sacrifice fly, and the Padres would have had the game tied 3-3 with a runner on third and 2 outs. Obviously, it does not all boil down to this controversial 9th inning and what Xander Bogaerts ended up being called out instead of getting the walk that he deserved. But it was a tough pill to swallow for Padres fans because sometimes it just comes down to that one inning to make the magic happen. And well, Xander Bogaerts and Mike Shildt both frustrated after the game.
Well, we talk about it now. I mean, what do you want me to do? You know, it's a ball, and yeah, it's just messed up the whole game. You know, I mean, can't go back in time, and talking about it now won't change anything. So it was bad, and thank God for ABS next year. You know, because this is terrible.
Look down to me, you know, but I don't see great, and I'm kind of far away. But most importantly, you know, Bogey felt like he was down. He's not a guy that, you know, is looking, not any of our guys really, but Bogey also in particular is not a guy that's, you know, overly dramatic about close pitches. And, you know, it's a big pitch. It's a big swing pitch. You know, it turns a tie and run, and then what unfolded after that was could have been very impactful. But, you know, we had other opportunities too.
We'll get into the other opportunities here in a second, but Xander Bogaerts did mention the ABS and the fact that it's coming next year, which allows players to be able to, you know, have challenges of their own at the plate. And that would have been a ball, and Xander Bogaerts would have gotten his base. Who knows what would have happened if two players got hit back-to-back, which would have loaded the bases with no outs, and whether runs would have come home and the Padres would have made a magical comeback to stun the Cubs in Game 3 and move on to the NLDS. Who knows? And at the end of the day, that home plate umpire simply cannot get that call wrong. All right, let's talk about the offense for the Padres because, well, it was quite abysmal in the series, minus one hit from Manny Machado that resulted in a couple of runs off of a home run. They did not hit well at all. Fernando Tatis Jr. did not show up in this series, which is a bummer because last year he was absolutely phenomenal in the postseason as he seemingly carried the Padres with his bat. This year he was absent, batting under 100. Guys like Luis Arraez didn't bat well. Manny Machado barely batted over 100, and if it weren't for that home run, we would also pretty much be saying, where was Manny Machado's contributions to this team? And even then, I think we can still say that after 3 games and needing their star players to come up big, they didn't. Jackson Merrill had a big home run tonight. He had an okay series. The 2 guys that I really liked in the series obviously were Xander Bogaerts, Freddie Fermin. They both played really well. Ryan O'Hearn had some hits, robbed by him by Dansby Swanson, who had an incredible defensive series for the Chicago Cubs. But after last postseason and the way it wrapped up against the Dodgers, it's really hard to see the Padres go out like this. After 24 scoreless innings to end the postseason last year in which they got stunned, it is quite stunning that the Padres come up short on the offensive end in the postseason this year, especially when we look to the end of the regular season, which I know is a very small sample size as we look at the big picture of 162 games. But the Padres, over the last 6 games of the regular season, were the second highest scoring team in the MLB. Tatis Jr. was starting to hit well. Jackson Merrill was hitting well. Manny Machado was getting the bat going. Xander Bogaerts, after a fractured foot, looked like he was going as good as he could too. You had guys really starting to hit the ball well. And then what happens? The power completely pretty much goes away, minus 2 home runs. One mattered. The other one didn't end up mattering so much because of what I said with the Xander Bogaerts and what may or may not have happened. But the offense cannot continue to sputter like this in the offseason for this, or in the postseason for this team. And quite frankly, it's really disappointing because if we look at the season as a whole, this team was inconsistent on the offensive end for guys that they have a lot of talent. Guys were injured this year, that is for sure. You saw guys like Jackson Merrill getting injured, and that really hurt. Ramon Laureano wasn't with this team. He fractured his finger right before the postseason, which really hurt this Padres team as well. And then guys weren't into a rhythm on the offensive end in the postseason. But as we start to look at Manny Machado, who gets older, and you know, this team as a whole, which we'll talk about some of the pieces they could potentially be losing, and just the team as what we look at them, it's hard to say as time goes on that next year will be the year, as it kind of feels like in some ways 2024 was the year with all the momentum they had, they were playing well. But just like last season, the offense sputters again. Let's talk about pitching in this game. Yu Darvish took the mound and started for the Padres in Game 3 of this NL Wildcard Series against the Cubs. And while he had a solid first inning, but then the second inning went as poorly as it could have, as he gave up 4 hits, loaded the bases up. He'd end up being credited with 2 runs. Jeremiah Estrada would come in with the bases loaded and no outs. He was only giving up 1 run. Jeremiah Estrada was absolutely fantastic. I know he's gotten a lot of grief this season, for his performances, especially as of late. But this is the same dude who struck out sides and was phenomenal for the Padres in many games as well. I thought he pitched well. Obviously, he gave up the 1 walk, which allowed 1 of the runs, which made it 2-0 in this game where the Cubs were able to go. But he really kind of stemmed the tide, like Jake had mentioned earlier, in which you thought, okay, well, now all the Padres need some runs. They didn't get those runs, though. It was kind of disappointing for Yu Darvish to come out the way that he did and pitch the way that he did, though. And that kind of ended up costing the Padres on the couple of runs in a game, in a series where it felt like we were through the finite parts of this and where you came down to the nitty-gritty and they needed to get the job done. So that was tough, but you can't fully blame it on them. Let's talk about the bullpen a little bit. Obviously, a big talking point in this one is Michael King coming into this game and only pitching 1 inning. And I think if you told Padres fans before this season started, the guy that you presume to be your ace will only come in and pitch 1 inning in the postseason, well, that's really tough. And for the bullpen today, it was really tough because it felt like they were stretched thin. When you had guys like Mason Miller pitching a lot, even though Mike Schultz said that he would have thrown Mason Miller in there if they were in a tied or really close game scenario. Adrian Morejon also came in and pitched. But Michael King was in there. He only pitched an inning. And then they turned to Robert Suarez earlier than they have all season long. They had him come in so early, he wasn't in a closing situation, and then they pitched him for longer than what he's used to, over 30 pitches, and then he would end up giving a home run up, which would make it 3-0. I thought the Padres should have gone longer with Michael King in this game. He is a starter. I know he's dealt with his injury issues, with the shoulder injury and the nerve, the left knee inflammation as well, which kept him out for so much time, and it never really felt like Michael King was built up to the Michael King that Padres fans really saw last year, who took over games and had a dominant performance in the NL Wildcard Series against the Braves at Petco Park last year. That was a really tough pill to swallow. But at the end of the day, they don't. And Robert Suarez ends up giving a run. It doesn't obviously cost the Padres this game because they end up losing 3-1. But I think people will have questions as to why Michael King didn't pitch more. Well, here's Mike Schultz's explanation after the game.
I mean, listen, once we're in the bullpen in the second inning, and I thought the bullpen was fantastic. I mean, end of the day, we held them to a run. The Suarez decision was actually pretty easy when Morejon and Miller had eaten up a bulk of innings, especially yesterday. So we knew the spot for them. Suarez, we didn't pitch in the first game. He'd had some days off prior to that. 1 1/3 yesterday. Fresh's best guy. You're down 2-0 in the 6th. You're in a closing situation. And we'd already used Estrada for 2 innings, to get out of and limit the damage in the second. So at that point, it was pretty clear cut, and we knew we could go to Morejon and Miller if we had been able to tie or get ahead.
It was tough for the Padres as they were stretched a little bit in the bullpen, and you think about Jason Adam, how much they wish they had him. Of course, he got injured in that Orioles series earlier this year with the ruptured quad tendon, misses the rest of the season, will miss part of next year probably, as well as he tries to work his way back up. But having more arms, I mean, the Padres had the best bullpen, and it kind of was tough for them, at the end of the year that were stretched just a little bit thin in such a big series. All right, let's recap the season, shall we? The Padres win 90 games, and they make it to the postseason for the 4th time in 6 years. And frankly, that is a lot to be proud about, even though they did not make the postseason push that they wanted to, and many fans maybe thought they believed they could after the trade deadline. After the trade deadline, it felt like San Diego was in a frenzy for all the pieces they picked up. They got their left fielder in Ramon Laureano. They got another bat and more depth in Ryan O'Hearn, who you're seeing on the screen right there. They got a catcher in Freddie Fermin. They got a flamethrower in Mason Miller, who provided some wonderful moments in Game 2 with how fast he was throwing it, 103, 104, the placement, the slider. He threw an immaculate inning this year. There's the walk-off hits. The grand slam started coming on the back half of the season. And, it's frustrating to watch because you see how much talent was on this team. And I think a lot of people after that trade deadline definitely thought this could be a team that could really push into the postseason deep because of how good they looked on paper all of a sudden. But sometimes, obviously, paper doesn't describe the whole thing. The inconsistencies still came for this team at times, but despite all of that, the Padres still were in the thick of a race with the Dodgers for the NL West and also to potentially get that top NL wildcard spot from the Cubs. Ultimately, it didn't happen that way. The Padres lost some games that they probably really wish they had back, but so did the Dodgers. And the Dodgers had lost so many games, more than many probably thought that they were going to. And we end this thing with the Padres coming up a couple of games short of the division. They come up a couple of games short of the top NL wildcard spot. And obviously, there was just a lot of inconsistencies, injuries. Every team dealt with it. But from the Padres standpoint, seeing how talented they were, and you felt like maybe they were going to pick up some momentum there on the back half, and they did at times. I mean, they started off the season as the hottest team in the MLB. They picked up after the trade deadline with all these pieces and how well Ramon Laureano specifically was hitting. They felt like they were one of those teams that you could get really excited about and could make that deep playoff push. Yet, we're talking about a season in which things wrap up in the NL Wildcard Series. They were able to force that Game 3, just not able to get it done. And so as this season ends, I guess we go ahead and start looking to next year because we don't really have a whole lot more to talk about at this point other than maybe what we covered and offensive struggles, whatnot, and all that jazz. So here's a graphic of your notable free agents coming into next year, and the starting pitchers is one that is interesting. Michael King will be a free agent, mutual option with the team, so he could very well return, option in. He was injured a lot this year, as we mentioned this year, so that'll be very interesting. Dylan Cease will be a free agent. He obviously had his ups and downs this year, ball control, placement, gave up the home runs. I don't anticipate seeing Dylan Cease coming back next year. Robert Suarez can opt out. He could become a free agent. I think he's going to want to get a bag. You know, obviously he was one of the high saves leaders in all of the MLB tops in the National League. He was absolutely incredible. With the Padres having a guy like Mason Miller now, maybe Mason Miller is who they turn to. I don't know. There's also the rumors that maybe he becomes a starter. They kind of stretch him out over innings. It's possible too. It's hard to say, and I guess we'll see what happens in that realm, or if the Padres try to keep intact their amazing bullpen, but I think it's likely we don't see Suarez. And then you're going to see some free agents at the first baseman designated hitter position. We saw Luis Arraez the past, couple seasons with this team. His value is that he hits the ball really well. He gets on base because of that high batting average, batting champion over the last couple years, not this year. Then we saw Ryan O'Hearn picked up at the trade deadline for the Padres. So that makes it interesting. What are they going to do there? Who will they keep? How will they try and save money? Those are going to kind of be into play. And then Ramon Laureano, he is slated to be a free agent. I don't expect him to go anywhere simply because he has a club option, and the Padres would be very silly to let him go, especially with the way that he played in the back half of the season for the Padres. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the Padres do with these guys moving forward. Ramon Laureano probably being the one that is the least bit of a question mark. I think Michael King probably ends up coming back. And then the other guys, I guess we're going to have to see. But, this Padres team is going to have to figure it out. And I think one of the things that they also have to figure out is what kind of free agent signings can this team make. They're going to be, financially restricted a little bit because they're going to have to pay guys like Tatis, Machado more, Bogarts more. I mean, all these guys that are on their contract, their price is obviously going to go up into their next year of their contract. And so that's going to, require less financial spending. More or less, they're not going to probably be able to make a huge free agent splash. Maybe some team type of friendly deals like they were able to get Nick Pivetta on, and then they got all kinds of value out of him, obviously. So we'll see what the Padres are able to do in that department of how much more they can get out of the guys that they have, what else they're able to add. Obviously, the farm system's kind of, weaker. Does a guy like Salas get called up finally from the minors and become a backup catcher to Freddie Fermin next year? And then we'll see how the rest of the pieces kind of plug and play and what the Padres are able to do. But it kind of feels as they keep losing more pieces every single year, the makeup of this team is kind of getting lost a little bit. But I still like, if they're able to bring back Michael King next year, I like what they're able to do at pitching. If you got Michael King, you're going to bring back Nick Pivetta. So, those two, if Michael King's able to stay healthy next year, maybe he's able to return to form. Then you have some question marks. Obviously, Joe Musgrove's going to be back next year, but can he return to form? Yu Darvish is going to be back next year. Is he still on, a few more years of his contract? And what is he going to be like next year? But if you have those four guys and then you have to fill in a fifth guy and figure out what you're going to do there, I mean, that's still a good starting pitching rotation, barring everybody stays healthy. And then you got to figure out what you're going to do with the bats. How do you get more power at the top of the lineup, which is why I'm a little concerned whether Luis Arraez is going to be returning next year. I'd be interested to see what they do at the top of the lineup and getting more power, more OPS, helping maybe drive in a guy like Fernando Tatis Jr., who does a great job getting on base, and continue to draw in more walks, even though he was pretty terrible at the plate, if just all being, and I think he said it at the end of the game too, so I don't feel bad saying it. He was really good at drawing walks and being patient as the year went on, I thought, and getting on base. And so if they can get a guy in that 2 spot or somebody that can drive him home more, that would be big, drive up his run total. But all these questions will be continued to figure out. Obviously, the baseball season's still going on. Then we'll get the free agency. Then we'll figure out the rest and see where the Padres go. But that's our small bow on the season so far. Jake and John will be joining me next week, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it more, about this Padres season. But, you know, they still got 90 wins. 4 playoffs in 6 years still keeps them relevant. They're still going to have their key pieces like Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado, Jackson Merrill, Xander Bogaerts. All those guys are going to be coming back, and all Padres fans can say right now is, well, we'll see what we can do next season. All right, you can always catch us on the final quarter on CBS 8 Plus, on CBS8.com, on CBS 8 on your channels in San Diego. Thanks for tuning in for this Padres end of season special, I guess, as if you want to call it. Padres fans, I hope you're not taking it too hard. I know it's a little bit of a bummer. Let's see what the Padres can do next season. Catch y'all next time.